قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري، قرآني طوق نجاتي. قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري، قرآني طوق نجاتي. قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري، قرآني طوق نجاتي.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد. Today we are going to be discussing a very sensitive topic. A topic that is very difficult to do justice with. And whichever way one discusses, it is open for criticism, but it is a topic that is necessary to talk of, especially in the current situation that the Muslim Ummah faces. The Muslim world is in a crisis never seen before. Disunity, chaos, war, killing, foreign policies against Muslim lands, lack of true Muslim leadership, dictatorial rulers within our lands, frustrations by the common Muslim, which resulted in the Arab Spring. Muslim leadership, both political leadership and scholars, were unable to fulfill the vacuum that this Arab Spring created. Situation becoming worse, and one primary reason is the separation of the mosque and politics, the fall of the Khilafah. And when reference is made to disunity, when reference is made to the disunity of Muslims, and especially in the current situation, one's mind immediately goes to Iraq, to Syria, and consequently to the ISIS. One's attention is immediately drawn to the Khilafah it has proclaimed in an area straddling across modern Syria and Iraq. And this is the topic that I wish to talk today, and that is the situation in Iraq, the situation in Syria, and the whole discussion around this movement that has come up, ISIS. But before going on to that, let's talk a little bit on the importance of the Islamic Khilafah. In the early 1920s, in the words of Lord Curzon, the British foreign minister at the time, appears to have captured the Khilafah's significance. The Khilafah's significance, Khilafah meaning the Islamic Khilafah, the governance of Islam and the Islamic republics. So the words of the British MP, Foreign Minister Lord Curzon, actually appears to have captured the Khilafah's significance when he announced to the House of Commons, "We need to put an end to anything which brings about any form of Islamic unity between the sons of the Muslims. As we have already succeeded in finishing off the Khilafah," referring to the Ottoman Khilafah, "we must ensure that there will never arise again unity for the Muslims, whether it be intellectual or cultural unity. Now, since the demise of the Khilafah, the question of Islam in politics and the question of a Sharia-based government has confronted every Islamic movement in the Muslim world. Regardless of how they try to resolve, or regardless of how they try to resolve the answer to this question of establishing a political Sharia-based Islamic government, whichever movement came up in the history of Islam since the collapse of the Khilafat Uthmaniyah, this was one major concern of most Muslim movements. Much has been said and thought regarding the proclamation of the Khilafah. When I'm talking about much has been said and much thoughts have been expressed regarding the proclamation of the Khilafah by the ISIS in Iraq or Syria. There are those who are nostalgic, having a feeling of good because of the good old days when we remember the good old days of the Khilafat Uthmaniyah. There are those who think that this was long overdue. There are those who are of the view that we wish to join the people who will emerge from Khurasan, as has been predicted by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there are those who will support or who simply support the idea of ISIS or the idea of establishing an Islamic Khilafah, primarily and most simply because it is against the West. However, on the other hand, there are those who are suspicious, citing a conspiracy. There are those that are suspicious, citing that this is backed by some Western powers. There are those who strongly oppose the tactics and the methodology employed. But rather, let me say, there are those who strongly oppose the alleged tactics and the methodology employed by this movement. Whatever the divergent views we have cited, I wish to share with you during the course of this discourse some thoughts on the matter. When we analyze the ahadith literature, and that also of a particular type, we can draw the conclusion that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam requested Allah three things. He prayed to Allah and asked Allah for three things. Two of his prayers were accepted. The third one was not accepted. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this ummah not be destroyed by a single natural catastrophe. He asked Allah that this ummah of his should not be entirely destroyed by a single natural catastrophe. This prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was granted. He asked Allah that the entire ummah will not be, or rather he asked Allah that external enemies should not completely annihilate the ummah. In other words, the entire ummah should not be annihilated by an external enemy. This prayer of the Prophet ﷺ was also granted. But he also asked that this ummah remain united. This prayer of the Prophet ﷺ was not granted by Allah. In fact, the unity will be destructive. It will lead to bloodshed. It will lead to mass killings. It will lead to death. And we see this, especially in the time that we are living in. This prayer of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which was not accepted by Allah, surfaced, the consequence of this prayer surfaced during the time of the Khilafah, or rather to the latter periods of the Khilafah, and in the long annals of history, it raised its head many times. However, in the current situation that we are living in the times that we are living in the era that we are living in, it has reached a very intensive state. The disunity that we see in the ummah is actually frightening. And it is from among the signs of the last day. It can be gleaned from the ahadith that there will be disunity in the ummah. It is a given. It has happened in the past, and it will be naive to think it is not happening presently. It is as clear as daylight. It will be foolish to imagine that it will not occur in the future. In fact, it will be worse in the future. Nonetheless, it does at all mean that we must become fatalist. That means, it does not mean that we must be fatalist and accept things and events as inevitable and just accept it and not try and not endeavor to establish unity, because the Quran Kareem tells us, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Hold firm, all of you, onto the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Stay tuned, inshallah. When we return, we will continue with this very important discussion about the condition of the ummah in the context of our era.
طوق نجاتي قرآني نبض حياتي قرآني طهر ذاتي